What is up, realized men? In today's video, I'm going to talk about one of the most destructive habits that men today fall victim to, which is people pleasing. I'm going to show you why this is literally ruining the earth, and how you can reclaim your power, live a fulfilled life, and make it win-win for everybody while you're doing it. So let's start off with a story. So there once was this lighthouse keeper, and his primary objective was to keep the beacon lit with oil, because where his lighthouse was located, it was a coastal area. There was a bunch of rocks, and a bunch of ships would always go by, and his lighthouse was the only thing keeping the place lit. So one morning, someone knocked on his door, and he went downstairs, opened the door, and he saw a passing traveler. Now this guy, he had a whole bunch of bread. He had all this bread. He said to the lighthouse keeper, "Hey, I've got this bread. Would you be willing to trade some of your oil for this bread? I really need some oil." So the lighthouse keeper, he was taught to be a good man. He was taught to help out his neighbor. So he conceded. He said, "Sure, I will do that." Despite having a whole bunch of bread in his fridge, he did this because he didn't want to look like a bad guy. So he gave the guy some bread, and the guy was on his way. The next day, someone knocked on his door. It was his neighbor. And his neighbor said, "Hey man, I ran out of oil. Could I please borrow some oil?" Not wanting to look like a bad neighbor, this guy gave him some of his oil. His neighbor was down on his luck, and he's like, "Okay, I'll give you some oil," because that's the right thing to do. The next day, you can guess where this goes. A beggar comes to his door and begs. He begs the lighthouse keeper and said, "Please, sir, can I have some oil? There's a town down the road. I want to go down to that town, take some of that oil, sell it so that I can have a better life for myself. I'm really at the end of the line here, please." Not wanting to look like a bad Samaritan, he wanted to be a good Samaritan. So he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll give you some of this oil." And the beggar was very happy, very pleased, and went on his way. So that night, the lighthouse keeper was sleeping like a baby, feeling really good about himself because he was helping all these people. But then he woke up to a loud boom. He ran outside and he saw a huge ship which just crashed into the coastal rocks because he didn't have enough oil to keep the lighthouse lit. So whatever good he did prior to this disaster was undone by the fact that 100 people died in this ship. He forgot to pay attention to what was most important, which was his objective. And this is the affliction that's affecting so many men today and is literally ruining the world. I'll give you examples of that, but first let's talk about where this programming comes from that leads men to constantly feel the need to please other people pleasing at the expense of themselves. Now tell me if you relate to this. When you're young, you might have dropped a glass or a bowl or something and it just shattered everywhere, and your parents probably yelled at you and say, "What the hell's wrong with you? How could you be so clumsy? You're the worst," this, that, and that. Made you feel pretty bad about yourself. The same scenario played out, but this time instead of you dropping it, it was a visitor, a neighbor, or a friend or something, and your parents were probably like, "Oh, don't worry about that. We'll take care of it. We'll clean it up." It was completely different behavior. So what this communicates to the young brain, which is still learning, which is just absorbing everything, is we need to constantly put our needs to the side, and other people are on if this is a pedestal, other people are above us. This is what we need to do. And you can see this in society. Whenever people think about rich people, the connotations are always something evil, something diabolical. The archetype of the rich man is Mr. Burns, who's taking advantage of all the workers, whereas the archetype or the paragon of virtue is Mother Teresa, who's in the streets, looking at people's eyes and healing them, and working with orphans and not having any time to see Cardi B's concert, that type of thing. That's what we see. The interesting thing is, Jeff Bezos, although he is flying on this private jet, although he is eating on the gold plate, watching Francis Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic at UFC 260 while he's in the air, right? He's got that pay-per-view. Although he's doing all that, you could argue he's done more good for humanity than the likes of Mother Teresa. He's dedicated $10 billion, although his hands are not actively there helping people. That $10 billion goes a long way if we are looking objectively. So there is a situation where you can have your pie and eat it too, where you can win and other people can win. life doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be like chess where there is a winner for every loser. We could all win, but we need to change the way we behave. We need to change the way we look at things. So how does this people-pleasing behavior ruin the world? I'll give you 3 examples. We'll start with fitness. A lot of people put their own personal health and fitness to the side, right? People don't go to the gym, they don't eat healthy, they put that to the side because they see this as being some kind of vain, superficial type nonsense that they shouldn't worry about. They got bigger priorities like working and taking care of other people. Especially when people become parents, you know, new mothers, new fathers, when they have the baby, the last thing they're thinking of is exercising for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And this habit can continue as the kid grows up and they just never go to the gym, just get really fat. Especially mothers, you see this a lot. What I would argue is they're doing a disservice to that kid by not putting aside those 20, 30 minutes to exercise and take care of themselves. The long-term health effects are going to be quite detrimental. You know, they might develop some diseases, some health-related issues, and die an early death and not be there to watch their kid grow up and not be there for these crucial life moments. So that's one way that people mess up. Another way is in relationships. We're seeing an abundance of guys simping these days. You know, a bunch of guys with girlfriends that are doing OnlyFans, that are doing all this stuff that they are not okay with, but they just go along because of this people-pleasing type behavior. While the resentment builds up inside, right? The resentment just builds up inside and eventually they just snap. They either start an affair, they cheat, they engage in some domestic violence or some abuse, or maybe they go shoot up someplace. You know, this is what happens when people don't take care of their needs, when they let other people just step all over them, don't set boundaries in relationships. Everything suffers as a result. Or how about with work? How many people are not happy with their jobs right now? So many people. But this idea of chasing after a career that's fulfilling, a career where you are passionate, is seen as nonsense. However, as a result, we now have a bunch of people doing half-assed jobs because they're not passionate about it. Skipping steps. You know, you watch air crash investigations, you see all these planes falling out of the air, and it's because some mechanic forgot to tighten a couple screws because he doesn't care about his job. If we lived in a world where people cared, where they put their needs first and chose the career that best suit them, we'd have people that are passionate about what they do. People that won't skip steps. We won't have planes falling out the sky, right? Everybody will be perfectly placed in where they need to be. So those are just 3 examples of how people-pleasing ruins the world and how you need to build up your self-esteem, build up your self-image. Forget about that programming that you had when you were younger. Start taking yourself seriously. Start saying no more often, especially when you don't want to do something. Start looking at what's best for you, because when you start doing that, you can find these situations that are win-win for everybody. You could be like Jeff Bezos, you know, eating that spaghetti on the plane, you know, listening to whatever he's listening to while watching UFC 260. You can have that situation while helping other people. It doesn't always have to be give or take. Also, make sure to download my ebook. You know, I've been telling you guys this for like the past 100 videos. Download my self-mastery ebook and it's gonna change your life, I promise you. Do this and I promise you'll be one step closer to living and dying well. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate you. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell notifications so we can see more of each other. Until next time.